Okay, I think, yes, we are live. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and this is episode 36. I'm worried I'm going to say the wrong number. 36 of Motley Crew Chats. And I am joined this evening by my friend T from the YouTube channel An Erudite Adventure, which you run with your sister.
Yep.
And before we do anything else, whether you're brand new in the chat or watching the replay later, please go down in the description box below and check out the link to T's channel and give him a subscribe, because he is very close to 1,000 subscribers, you guys. When I checked today, we're like 30 subscribers away. So
Yeah.
everybody go and give T a subscribe, because obviously he makes awesome content. Because I have good taste in
Debatable.
friends. I have good taste in friends. So T, for everybody who isn't familiar with you, do you want to just give a quick introduction?
Yeah, so I'm T, like Tori mentioned. What is necessary to know about me? Basically, yes, I run a YouTube channel. My sister has kind of stepped away more because bit of busyness than desire, more so. But she still appears occasionally. We just did a wrap up, a year wrap up, 2024 wrap up that she was part of and stuff like that. So she's still around, just busy doing her own things. As far as I guess what we talk about is mostly a lot of fantasy, but we do get into a lot of historical fiction as well. That's probably the second largest genre on the channel. And then I'm just kind of getting into sci-fi. That's fairly recent for me. I thought I didn't like sci-fi for a long time. It turns out it's just Star Trek. But
shots fired.
Yep.
We're a minute and 50 seconds in, and T has already taken a pot shot at a fandom. Here we go.
That's all right. I'm okay with it. Let's see. Big Tolkien fan. I'll avoid the name of his main series if I can.
Everybody's got their bingo cards out.
But I do like The Hobbit. I'm finishing up my reread of The Hobbit, my annual reread of The Hobbit, which I'm late. I usually do that in December, and this year I'm doing it. I started in December and I ran out of time, got busy. Lord of the Rings will be next. Oh, I said it.
2 minutes, 20 seconds in.
That's all right. Let's see. There's not a whole lot else to me. I'm an Alaskan, and that's about the only other interesting thing about me.
That is pretty cool.
Somehow Tori manages to want to be my friend, so I guess that's good.
I'm only friends with cool people, so I mean, that'll speak for itself. I think the fact that you're from Alaska is really cool, because as I'm also, as we were talking about earlier, from a northern tundra style state, I've always imagined Alaska as being like Anchorage and maybe a couple other cities, and then like people that live with bears. That's kind of how I've always imagined Alaska.
Pretty accurate. The one thing is that we don't consider Anchorage Alaska. That's just Upper Seattle.
Oh, okay. So, noted. Okay. We do not claim them.
It's a joke. It's a joke, but it's also kind of true. They have more of the big city attitude, even though they're not a big city. So just.
Well, is it the biggest? I'm assuming the biggest city.
It is,
yeah. So, I mean, they kind of get a little big for their britches, maybe. Yeah. The biggest city in Alaska.
All 200,000 of them or whatever it is.
That's literally the size of the biggest city 30 minutes from me, which is not the biggest city in Minnesota. Yeah, so I have to ask this, and this is just me being a completely clueless non-Alaskan native. So have you, I'm assuming you've seen bears. I'm fascinated by bears.
I have not seen that many. I have seen some. I have one memory specifically of taking a road trip, probably either down to Anchorage or down fishing on the peninsula or something like that, and seeing 3 little baby bears walk across the road in front of me. I assume there must have been a mama bear in front of it, but we never saw that. Or I don't have that in my memory, but I remember the 3 baby bears. So no, we were in a car. We were in a vehicle. It was fine. I've seen a couple other ones, usually from a distance. It's been a while since I've seen one up that. I think that's probably the closest that I've ever seen them, but they're around. We see people see them all the time. I don't get out that much.
So you're a bookworm, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, fancy meeting you here.
Yeah.
So have you lived in Alaska your whole life?
Yeah.
Nice. I know you'd said last year we had scheduled a Motley Crue we were talking about scheduling a Motley Crue chat last year, and you were going down to, what was it, Panama?
Yeah.
Okay.
So technically I've lived in Alaska for all but 6 months of my life.
Okay. So you're not, I'm assuming the first 6 months, so you're not native born
No,
Alaskan.
those 6 months were in Panama last year.
Oh, I see. So, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
So that, I
I've
mean,
yes, native, well, not indigenous, but native to Alaska. Yeah.
right.
Born and
So
raised here.
Alaska to Panama is a pretty big jump.
Yeah.
So, like, what what were some of the biggest surprises going down there that were just like weather-wise, or like that were big changes from Alaska?
Traffic.
Oh,
That
really?
was the big one.
That makes sense.
Um, well, that, and also just the way that people drive, like the driving culture is different. They use their
Mm.
horns. They
Oh,
also
sure.
don't. I'm not sure what the rules of the road are, like if they actually have driving laws or not. So that was a little scary. Panama City is far too many people. I never want to be in a place I never want to live in a place that
Sure.
big. Like if I need to go there because that's where the airport is or something, then sure. But I don't want to. Too many people, too many vehicles. I mean, it's just. But that's really the biggest one. I knew to expect most of the other stuff. So the heat, I knew to expect. The humidity, I knew to expect. The bugs, I knew to expect. So it's, you can't prepare yourself for them, but you can expect them.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I had a very
that's really
similar
the biggest
experience when we went down across to New York about, oh gosh, how long ago was that now? 12 years, yeah, over 12 years ago now, because I was 6 months pregnant with my son, and we went to New York City. And I will always tell people, like, it never made me more happy to be a Minnesotan
Yeah.
than going to New York City. And I was like, there were some cool things there, but
Oh
I'm
yeah.
good. Like, I was ready to go back to my wide open spaces in about 10 minutes. It's like, it's too much. It's way too many people. There's concrete and steel everywhere.
Yeah.
And being 6 months pregnant in New York City was not a great
No,
experience.
doesn't sound fun.
No, it wasn't great. Pete says you had to adjust to there being more than 2 cars on the road at a time.
Pretty much. No, well, so the other day, actually, we're in Alaska, slick roads occasionally, especially when it gets above freezing and then rains and then freezes again.
Mhm.
So the other day, driving home from work, it was about like Panama because people were backed up because of an accident, and it's just that wasn't fun, but
Yeah.
that's fairly rare. Usually, you can move along pretty decently.
Yeah.
There's no fast speed limit, no high. I think the highest is 65 anywhere in Alaska. So and that's
Nice.
basically on the road between Anchorage and Fairbanks.
And that's the only time you have to slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
I know, like, there's a big highway on the western side of Minnesota and the Dakotas that goes straight north up towards Fargo. And I always get really excited when we go on that road because I can't remember what the high speed limit is, but like in Minnesota, it's pretty much 65 is the top you're going to see.
yeah.
But as soon as you go over to the Dakotas, where the population density is a lot
Yeah.
less, that speed limit goes up quite a bit, which is always great fun. I always feel like I'm getting into trouble when I drive over there.
Yeah.
So I want to say hi to everybody in the chat real quick. Pete, we saw a minute ago. Hello, Pete. Sarah Beth, hello. How's it going? It is 60 plus degrees difference or close to it today between me in Minnesota and T in Alaska, which was kind of mind blowing for January. I won't lie.
Negative 18 right now.
Yeah,
Fahrenheit.
we're at 37, so it dropped quite a bit since this afternoon, but we have like no snow. I don't know. Our snow all went south this year. I don't know what
It's been a
happened.
very weird year
It's been a
because
very
it's
weird
been
year.
warm for us too. We've got the occasional colder moments, but nothing like normal.
Yeah. Kale, hello. Zeely's here. Zin's here. Hello. Hey, Matt. How's it going? Chris Navo's here.
Yeah.
See, this is a great point, Zin. We will definitely be talking about Bill the Pony this evening. I don't know, T, if you were there for my discussion with Anitha.
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't remember.
It was during a reading sprint a couple weeks ago now, week and a half ago. And we got into it a little bit because she was convinced that Bill the Pony was actually a donkey and that a pony and a donkey are the same thing.
So that's where that comes from.
That's where that came from. Yep. It's a crucial
I've seen the
part
discussion, the backlash, but
yeah. So, and then I can't remember at one point, I think she said, and to paraphrase, I'd have to go back to, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it was something to the effect of like, does Bill the Pony even matter at all? And I was like, I'm sorry, stop. I won't handle the slander on my channel. So as a resident Tolkien expert.
Oh, not an expert.
I have not read the books, so that makes you the expert in the room.
Okay.
I would love a dissertation on why Bill the Pony matters.
Okay, well, he helped Frodo get from Weathertop to Rivendell before he died, so there's that.
Oh, yep. I did not know that.
Yeah, he was the one who they I mean, he was the pack horse from Bree to Moria, and then they had to send him back at Moria because he wouldn't enter the mines, and it was just not. There was no other option. So he was the pack horse the entire time, but after Weathertop, after Frodo gets stabbed, Frodo can't walk, so they have to get him to Rivendell somehow, and so they put him on the pony.
So Bill the Pony legitimately saved Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, exactly. He without his contribution, Sauron would have won.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
His name has been cleared. Pete has a great point. You're cool because you live in low temperatures.
Sure.
Touche.
We'll go with that.
Hey, Derek. Yeah, I thought that was funny too. Always lording their 3 traffic lights over everyone else.
Yep. There's a lot of traffic lights in Anchorage. It's not fun.
I believe it. Well, yeah, with 100,000 people, you gotta like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't actually know the population, but there's just over 800,000 total in Alaska, so it's not that high.
Anchorage, Alaska population. Oh, okay. So we're at 291,000 during the 2020 census.
Wow. Yeah. So almost 300.
Huge.
Yeah. Gigantic.
I mean, for Alaska.
Yeah.
I wonder what your population density ratio is in Alaska. That would be
very low. It's very low.
Teartech says, I know a family that lives on an island in Alaska, and it's generally warm and rains 50 weeks out of the year there.
Yep.
Wow.
It's about right. Most of the islands, down south are like that. Even the coast is like that.
Sure.
In a lot of areas.
Well, it's closer to Seattle, so that would make sense.
Yep.
Kale says, dude like Hella had good Alaska YouTube videos years ago. Oh, we'll have to check it out. Hi, Jacob. Hey, Preacher. Hello, everybody. I just want to make sure I'm catching up before I move on, because I'm going to try and have some of the conversation not be about Lord of the Rings, but I have so many questions.
Okay. When are you going to read it?
That is an excellent question, and I plead the fifth.
Well, you read The Hobbit. Was it last year?
It's 2024 for my 33rd birthday. So,
all right.
Yeah, which was the only time that was appropriate for me to read The
Hobbit.
Hobbit.
An appropriate time for sure. Yeah.
So I'm now an adult officially. I've read The Hobbit and I turned 33. So, yeah, I'm really. The Hobbit was a great experience. I did a semi-immersion read where I was reading the book and also listening to Andy Serkis narrate it because it's Andy Serkis.
Right.
And that was phenomenal. And I really loved, I know he's brilliant, but I wasn't sure what it was going to be like to hear him read the story, you know? And I was really pleasantly surprised because one of the things that I loved about it is you could tell that he knew the rest of the cast well enough to like give a hint of them in the voices he was using without making it an impression, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I liked a lot.
I also, and you'll notice it if you do the same thing with Lord of the Rings, you'll notice it with the people from Gondor, because Sean Bean has a very different accent from the guy who plays Faramir in the movies.
Yes.
But Serkis does the thing where he mixes the Sean Bean's accent with that of the other guy, and it works really well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think honestly the reason I haven't read them yet is very similar to the reason it took me so long to read The Hobbit. I think like I didn't read the books growing up, didn't have them read to me growing up, and I was about 11 when the first movie came out.
Yeah.
And I saw it and that was such a huge like mind-blowing gateway into bigger epic fantasy as a kid. And the movies were my Lord of the Rings for this whole time. And so I think I've always been a little nervous to like I don't know what that experience is going to be going into the books. And I'm going to I know I've said this a million times, so everybody get your bingo cards out. But I have started Fellowship of the Ring 3 times.
Yeah.
And I get to Tom Bombadil, and every time I'm like, I'm out. I don't care.
I would be careful about listening to the Serkis narration for Bombadil.
Oh,
it's not bad. It's a choice. It's a very interesting choice, and it works. But it's a choice.
Okay.
It's a little bit. It's more zany than I would have ever imagined for the character.
So, yeah.
It's not bad though at all. It does fit the character, and it's a portrayal.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not the definitive version of the character.
Right.
But it is a little off-putting almost
at
times. So.
I mean, maybe that'll be the trick. It'll throw me off guard so much that I just get through it. I don't know.
Right. Just go with it.
I'm very much, and my husband will never forgive me for this, but I am very much team why is Tom Bombadil in this book? Like, and I know, I know that's an unpopular opinion for a lot of people.
I don't know if I've made the video on that yet.
Ooh, do we get a sneak preview? How do you feel about Tom Bombadil, T?
Depends on what story you're telling. Because if you're telling the story of the movies, which is the quest to destroy the One Ring, he is not necessary.
Right.
If you are telling the story of the books, which is a memoir of the adventures of 4 hobbits during the events of the Lord of the Ring, or of the War of the Ring, then he becomes important.
Okay.
And so it depends on the lens at which you're looking at this story.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and you said you weren't a Tolkien expert. Come on. It depends on the version.
This is a specific thing that I've talked or thought a lot about. So
yeah, but you realize that when you start the conversation with it depends on which version of the story you want to tell, that sounds very official.
No.
So I will maybe what I'll do, and maybe this will be a good like hopefully catalyst for you to make the video. I'll watch your video before I read the trilogy. How about that? Because then maybe that'll put me in a better mood about Bombadil.
I will check and make sure that I haven't made it yet. And if not, then I might try and do that for Tolkien Reading Day this year.
Okay.
Let me...
Hopefully soon. That's my answer to when I'm going to read them. I do want to read them in the next year or two. My main priority right now is getting through Malazan. I think once that's done, I'm going to feel a lot more ready to jump into some stuff like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. And this is the other thing that I've heard that has made me really nervous about the books, and it's Two Towers is my favorite film of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
Helm's Deep is one of my favorite fictional battles of all time.
Yeah.
Because it's awesome.
Yep.
And I've heard that it's almost nothing in the books, which makes me very upset.
Well, Tolkien doesn't write battles in detail. He approaches them from a very strategic mindset, like a big picture, looking down on them and saying, how does this affect things? How does this event affect this part of the battle? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then he looks at the after effects of it. What
Right.
does this cause? How does this affect the rest of the world?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's not the nitty gritty details like in the movies,
Right.
but there's a different level of brilliance to it. You
Right.
can if you can approach it, if you can see it the way that he intended it, where it's not detail oriented. Um, it's an effective. He's a very effective battle writer as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that actually, honestly, out of all of the times I've mentioned that, that makes me feel better about it because I've always been kind of protective,
And
I
it's
guess,
it
of
does
that
include there are
aspect.
details that are included. There are
Yeah.
details that are included for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a huge turning point for so many of the characters. And it's, I've always loved an underdog battle. I've always loved the fierce few against incredible odds. And
Yeah.
um Legolas skateboarding on a shield is something I probably could have done without, to be honest. Um,
But it's just cool
but it's
factor,
just
and you
cool.
can get away with it.
Exactly. It's like um, okay.
I like Doug's comment here. Uh, for me,
Uh,
Bombadil serves as a break from the high suspense of the first few chapters, which increases the suspense of later chapters. If you maintain a constant stress level, the impact is lower. And I 100% agree. That is
totally agree.
not the only thing about the Bombadil chapters, but that is absolutely one of the things that I have in my explanation of them, of their
Nice.
necessariness, need for inclusion.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a really good point too, because I know in some of the books that I read, even last year, like my issues with Ship of Magic, this by Robin Hobb, this is almost word for word my issue with it. And also one of the reasons why I had such a hard time with Pierce Brown's Dark Age is
mm,
that when you have so much heavy content and like hit after hit after hit and you never have a moment to breathe, like yeah, it's a lot, but it also kind of leads you into this space of emotional burnout where you just don't care anymore. Like you
yeah,
kind of detach from the immersion too much, I
hmm
think.
yeah,
Yeah. And it makes it less personal to the characters too, because you can't like
yeah,
it's too much.
yeah.
I'm not sure what this did I miss a earlier. No.
Well, it's not really a spoiler. Everybody knows that that's going to happen to Smaug. Like, it's
Somebody
a given from page one.
when I felt I felt bad kind of, but in my first bullet journal video that I posted last month, I mentioned something about Gimli and Legolas and Aragorn going across or when they meet the riders of the Rohirrim for the first time, which is like not a massive Lord of the Rings spoiler in my opinion.
Right.
And somebody was very upset with me that I mentioned that on the video. And I was like,
Ignorant.
I'm sorry, but like also we're at a point where like and that
No,
wasn't like,
yeah.
they
If
all
the
die
book
at
is
the
old
end.
enough to be considered a classic,
Yeah,
there's spoilers no longer matter. So,
right. Yeah.
but
Frodo like they do actually throw the ring into Mount Doom, guys. Sorry.
sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Plus the effect that those movies have had on pop culture.
Oh
If
yeah.
you don't know, I mean, if you don't know what happens to the ring at the end, then you've somehow managed to live under a rock your entire life, which I'm not saying is bad,
No.
but don't be surprised if other people haven't.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting too because I talked about this with my mom the other day how like, for her generation Star Wars was like the big,
Hmm. Yeah.
SFF moment. And for mine Lord of the Rings was absolutely a repeat of that because it was
Yeah.
just such a huge shift I think um in pop culture's view of fantasy and just the way that it started to really seep into the rest of culture more, I think, than it had
Yeah.
before. Um, and I would argue, despite me liking Lord of the Rings more, that I think Game of Thrones has had kind of a similar rebirth of that again.
Right. Yeah.
Um, which anytime something brings fantasy back into the mainstream eye, there are pros and cons,
Yeah.
as we've learned. but
Yeah.
But
It
yeah,
is about time for a new
I'm ready.
one,
I'd
and I'm
agree.
not sure what it's gonna be
Yeah.
yet, 'cause, uh, early 2000 late 90s, early 2000s was an interesting one because we had Harry Potter,
Mhm.
Star Wars prequels, and Lord of the Rings all at the same time, plus things like, Pirates of the Caribbean,
What a time to be
and just a
alive,
whole bunch of
honestly.
right, and I missed it.
Sorry.
Just but it's like, we're due for something new like that, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure what it's gonna be. Um,
It's
I
yeah,
I
it's
I could see a Sanderson adaptation doing
I
it,
could too.
but I could also see it not doing it. I could see it
Yeah.
just kind of not doing horrible just because there's so many Sanderson fans, but also not hitting that mass audience appeal
Mm.
in the same way. And which is really weird to say because as a fantasy writer, he basically is that mass audience appeal.
Yeah.
But I think for the general movie going audience, it wouldn't work that way for him.
Yeah. I think Dune has definitely had a moment. I don't know that it's
Mhm.
definitely not to the level of, like, Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, but I do
Right.
think that I've heard a lot of non-fantasy people when I do poke my head outside of our sphere of nerdiness here, I mean, I hear people talking about Dune that are just,
Yeah.
the locals. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I haven't gotten to watch the second Dune yet that
I haven't seen
came
either
out
one of them
last
yet.
year. I was in Panama when it came out, so I haven't been able to
Mm,
watch it. And it's disappointing because you really want to watch it on a big screen, but at
yeah.
some point I will. But I know they've got a prequel TV series that's been well received as well, and the both movies have been well received. There's a third one in the works apparently, and so
Mm,
it might, but I still don't know if it'll ever reach quite those highs,
yeah.
and I don't think Star Wars will again, at least not for a long time.
Well, and it'll be interesting too because, like, when Fellowship of the Ring came out, I mean, it took a little bit of time for the movies to gain
Mhm.
the traction they had by the time Return of the King came out.
Yeah,
And so it'll be interesting to see if Dune kind of continues that
yeah.
pattern as well. I haven't
I
read the
guess.
book yet, so I haven't wanted to watch the films until I read it.
Mm, yeah.
So we'll see.
I I like the book and I liked the first film. Like I said, I haven't watched the second one. But I thought they did a very good job at adapting the book faithfully for a new medium.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and it's not perfect. Like there's some things I'm not gonna poke some more buttons here. I'm not the biggest fan of Timothy
Go for it.
Chalamet.
Okay, that's fair.
so so like he's a good actor and he's a decent choice for Paul, but I wouldn't be mad if it was somebody else.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Have you seen The King?
no, I haven't.
That one, so I'm kind of, like, no shade to his success, I'm happy for him, but
Right.
I'm also not like, it's fine, I
Hmm.
guess. But I saw The King last year where he plays, one of the Henrys, and I cannot remember which number. Um, and it was very good. I was impressed by that one. I was like, "Okay, this was a really good movie." And I mean, Joel Edgerton was also in it, which is
Hmm.
honestly why I watched it. Um,
Right.
Because I also grew up around another movie that came out that was less well known than the ones you listed before, but that really impacted me growing up was, King Arthur with, like, Clive Owen and Ewan Grufford and Joel
Hmm.
Edgerton.
Right.
Mads Mikkelsen as Tristan, just saying, incredible.
Yeah. It
Um,
has a great cast.
it has an amazing cast. If you
Okay. Poke some
No
more buttons here. I
offense.
don't like Keira Knightley either.
Nope, you're in the right place. I was just about to say, if you take Keira Knightley out, it's a perfect film.
Yeah. It's
Um, yeah, that was not she was not like, she was great in Pirates, she's been good in other
mhm.
things, she was not the correct choice for Guinevere at
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
and I will stand by that till my dying day.
Yeah.
Um, this is a great question to figure out which one it was. It wasn't Henry VIII, I do remember that much. Um,
Uh,
yeah, The King was a really good I was really impressed by it, and I watched it because I was kind of on this kick of watching Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy films last year, and I
mhm.
was like, "Oh, Joel Edgerton was in The King, that's cool. Oh, it's Timothée Chalamet, okay, cool," and watched it, and I was like, "Wow, actually, that was pretty good." So,
Yeah, that's also got Pattinson in it, right?
yes, he plays the
Yeah.
French, Dauphin, uh, yeah, and
Okay.
we're like And this is, I think, a sad side effect of being raised in the Twilight era, which it's okay that you missed that one.
Yep, I'm okay with that one.
Because I didn't, and I was surrounded by teenage girls as a teenage girl who were obsessed with Twilight, and I remember reading the books and just being like, why are we obsessed with this? And then the movies came out, and it's not Pattinson's fault. He's actually a really good actor, in my opinion. I think he's got a lot of range.
Yeah.
But I will never, I'm trying to remove Edward Cullen from my brain and bleach it out, but I can't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's definitely made a name for himself outside of Twilight at this point with
For sure.
Tenet and the Batman and several of his other things, his indie projects that he's done. He's made a name for himself outside of it.
Yep.
And he's become a very good actor.
Yep. So. Agreed. Yeah, I think his acting is very impressive, and that's not a him thing; it's a me thing for sure. I think I was just so traumatized by the Twilight era that
I think he was too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. He's said multiple times, I think, that he would not have done them if he could go back. That's the hard part, is I feel like anytime an actor plays a character that's a very like pop culture heartthrob like that, they have a really hard time getting away from it afterwards, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This is also true. We are definitely on the downslope. MCU has been on the out for a while. Yeah.
Disappointing. I'm not surprised. It had a long run. I mean, it was 10 years in before they ended the Infinity Saga, and so it's gone down. There could still be some bright spots, but I think in general we're seeing the close of it. And quite honestly, I'm not too hopeful for DC either.
No, so. I don't. DC never hit the same.
It never hit the same. I like the Zack Snyder movies. I actually do like them, but more for the type of storytelling that he does. He's a very mythic storyteller.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I don't think I've ever had an opportunity to say this.
Let's go.
The way that I view Marvel versus DC is, to me, Marvel has always been ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And DC has always been extraordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Sure.
And that difference is subtle enough that there can be crossover between them. But when you see it played out, it's very obvious. I mean, like Superman, he's not an ordinary being. He tries to be, and the Clark Kent side of him tries to do some stuff. Even Batman, who does not have powers, he's not an ordinary being in the same way that Spider-Man is, who does have powers. And so I don't know how they managed to have that clear of a distinction for me, but
that makes a lot of sense though
about it.
Yeah. But. So, okay. So now that we've opened the MCU DC thing, this is something I feel like I don't talk about these very often on like live streams and stuff, which is surprising because I know a lot of us watch them and are like very familiar with all of those. And a lot of people love comics, a lot of people love superhero stuff. So let's get into it. So should we start with Marvel or DC?
DC is shorter at this point.
That's true. So Dark Knight, I love. I'm obsessed. Christian Bale will be my favorite Batman forever. And I know that there's a lot of people that like some of the older iterations of Batman better. But I loved Batman Begins, and The Dark Knight was brilliant. I think other than that though, and this is one that surprises me, a lot of people hated this film. I actually love the director's cut of Suicide Squad. I loved that movie. I thought that was fantastic. I don't know if you saw that one, but
no, I don't think I have. I've seen theatrical, and that's it.
Okay.
And yeah. So as far as Batman goes, I'm not the biggest Batman fan as it is. So like, he's not my favorite character, but he's also not my least favorite.
I won't kick you off the channel yet.
My favorite characters are from DC. My favorite characters are the characters who feel the most human, the most ordinary.
Yeah.
And so Flash, Green Lantern, those are the characters that for me resonate a lot more than Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman or anybody like that. As far as iterations of Batman. I haven't actually watched the older Batmans or the Christopher Reeve Superman. So like I'm not familiar with those other than just them being in pop culture. I'm not familiar with them.
Right.
But so basically the ones that I have watched are Christian Bale and Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson. Of those three, of the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins is my favorite of the three. Mm-hmm. I understand the brilliance of Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. Not my favorite. I don't care for it.
That's fair.
It's my least favorite of the three. So it goes Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, and then Dark Knight. But as far as iterations of Batman go, Ben Affleck's my favorite because he is so similar to the animated series, Batman the Animated Series, Justice League Animated. He's very similar to that character, a little bit different in mindset, but in terms of physicality, in terms of the way he moves, the way he fights, all that kind of stuff is very similar to animated series, and so I like that aspect of it.
Okay.
I think, like I mentioned, I think Rob's doing a good job as Batman. It's unfortunate that it's going to be 7 years between the two films, but
yeah, they're gonna have to cut some crow's feet off of him or something. Yeah,
something. But
yeah, I mean, honestly though, I know that like for time continuity and stuff, but can we normalize like not early 20-something superheroes? Like I love the idea of having some older superheroes. That would be awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, we're moving in that direction because our characters are growing or our actors are getting old. But I don't disagree. I think I would like a mix, like a good mix. So I'm a big Tom Holland fan and I think he's a great Spider-Man. Unfortunately, I think his movies are good, but they're not as good as they could be. Like he deserves better. And that's with them being good movies.
Yeah.
But I like that he's the younger kid in that, and then we have that relationship between him and Tony where there's an age difference, a father-son mentor type situation, and I really like that, and I don't want that in every story, but for some of them I like having that that relationship between an older character and a younger character.
Right.
And older Reed Richards would be nice. I'm not sure how I feel about Pedro Pascal being Reed Richards, quite honestly. I don't know how to pronounce his name, the Ewan Gruffud or whatever.
Yeah.
I love his, like, I think he's a perfect choice for Reed Richards. And I also think that if I were in charge of casting and could throw as much money at it as I wanted to, I would have gotten John Krasinski. It just
okay.
That would have been my choice. John Krasinski and Emily Blunt as Mr. Fantastic and Sue Storm.
That would be awesome.
That would be my choice. You fill out the rest of the characters as necessary, but those two would be my choice for sure.
They might actually have some chemistry then. Oops, did I say that out loud? Ewan Gruffud. I'm a big fan. Well, he was Lancelot in King Arthur, and loved his portrayal of Lancelot immensely.
He plays Horatio Hornblower, which is it's a series of TV movies that are naval, British naval, based on a book series, and he's fantastic in those. And I mean, they're naval battles and everything, and so like that in and of itself is fun to watch. And but that's a great series, and he's great in it.
Everybody has a lot of opinions on Pattinson. Hold on. High Life I have never seen. Google says it's Henry V, the Black Prince. That's right. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know that I'd put him up against Kenneth Branagh, but he did a good job.
I mean, Kenneth Branagh is kind of like unbeatable,
right?
in anything that he does. He's so good.
There's certain characters that like it does not matter who plays them ever again. Like if they were to ever come up with another, well, for example, with the new Harry Potter TV series, I'm like, Snape is not going to be Alan Rickman, I don't care who it is. I don't care.
Right. I don't quite honestly, I don't care about the series at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's unnecessary at this point. Maybe another 20 years and it would be necessary, but at the moment it's not.
Well, because the actors are still just like my age. They're not like even that old yet.
Very active in the film industry still. Like, they're not even trying to retire. Like, they're not old enough to try and retire. It's just, I don't know. It's a weird choice. It's money is the
100%
is the reason for it. And I get that, but it's also unnecessary in my opinion.
I agree. I want to go back and watch. I have never seen the Ben Affleck Batman films. I've never seen Robert Pattinson's Batman films because I just was like, I have The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, and I don't feel like I need any more Batman. But I do want to see them, and I think they'd be good. Yeah. Okay. So you're a big Tom Holland fan, so I'm guessing he's your favorite of the 3 iterations of Spider-Man in terms of films.
Okay. In terms of films,
rank them.
No.
Rank them.
Okay. In terms of actors,
okay.
I think that what's his name? First one, Tobey
Maguire
played a great Peter Parker. I think Andrew played a great Spider-Man, and I think Tom has a good balance of both.
Yeah.
He's not as good on one end or the other as either of the other two, but he's got a good balance of both. In terms of films, I don't see why people say that Spider-Man 2 is one of the best movies ever made, best superhero movies ever made. Like, I don't get that personally.
I don't either.
And like, a lot of it for a lot of people is nostalgia, and I don't have that tied. I don't have nostalgia tied to those movies for me. I actually think that the Amazing Spider-Man films, especially the first one, are far better than people give them credit for. And they did Andrew dirty by not allowing him to continue in that role. That's kind of my feeling with them. There's good things about all of them, but I think in general, just in terms of portrayal, and not just Andrew's portrayal of the character, but the whole film, the way that he was written and portrayed, and the filmmaking that went into him and everything, I personally think that the Amazing Spider-Man movies are my favorite.
I actually love that, because when I rank the portrayals of Spider-Man that I've seen, Tobey's my least favorite, which a lot of people don't like, because he's a lot of people's favorite, and I can completely respect that. I've never been a Tobey Maguire fan to begin with, so that didn't help. But one of the things that always gets me riled up is I actually really liked Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Spider-Man, and I also thought the movies were really good. Tom Holland's my favorite just because he's adorable and you know,
and he's so good in the role.
He
fits
good.
It so well.
He really does. And I think his chemistry with the older actors and it's just it's a really, really good whole picture thing. But I do think that, like you, I think Andrew Garfield really did not get enough credit for his portrayal of Spider-Man, in my opinion.
Sounds like Pete agrees with us.
Yes. So which I've gotten some serious fire from people about my opinion that Andrew Garfield is a good Spider-Man, which surprises me. I'm like, what? Did we watch the same films?
Right. I think I kind of think there's a little bit of a mindset approach to viewing those films, because if you're a cinephile, if you primarily you watch movies because they're movies, then I can see why people would say the Maguire films are the best. If you're modern generation, just generic audience going people, then I could see Tom Holland being the best. But for you and me especially, we're storytellers. We think in terms of story, and so we view movies differently. We view them from the story perspective, and so we see what was going on with the Amazing Spider-Man films, and they work for us in a way that they don't for a lot of other people.
I think, and you've seen, I'm assuming, the it's No Way Home that has the collab between the 3 of them, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've seen that, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And I won't spoil it for the people in the chat who haven't, but there's a full circle moment with Andrew's Spider-Man in that film that had me emotional. Like, I was so emotional about it. And and I think of all 3 iterations of Spider-Man, Andrew's version of him had, like, I got the most emotional in the Amazing Spider-Man films by far.
Right. Yeah.
So I
He's a
think,
very physical actor
he
in
is.
his in
Yeah.
terms of his performance and portrayal. I think he's one of those actors that just in general, like everybody knows he's great.
Yeah.
But nobody acknowledges how great he is.
Agreed. He's in one of my favorite films of all time, which I only saw in the last couple of years, and I'm kicking myself that it took me this long to watch it. Hacksaw Ridge is one
I need
of
to watch it
the
too.
best. Oh my gosh, T. It is one of the best
I
films.
know that I need to watch it. It's been high priority since it came out, and I
Like,
just
when
haven't
we're
gotten
done talking, go watch Hacksaw Ridge.
I should, but
It's so good. It's so good. I yeah, I watched it because I was like, wow, well, I know that this movie is like really lauded, and a lot of people say it's really amazing. And I've had like my favorite movies have been pretty much set for years. And that one just came in and blew them all out. Like, I was like, that is immediately in my top 5 films of all time. Just watching it once. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Um,
I fully expect the same thing to happen to me once I finally do get to it. And
yeah.
it came out it's rated R, and it came out when I was not young enough to go watch a rated R movie.
Oh, sure.
And so like I missed it then, and I just haven't gotten a chance to go back and watch it since then. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is your sign.
yes.
I actually thought about even doing a Discord watch along for that. Because that would also be kind of fun. And the other one I saw somebody mention earlier was Master and Commander is one that I have not seen yet, which is ridiculous.
That's fantastic. I like Russell Crowe, and
Yeah.
that's one of, I haven't watched everything with him in it, but like just his performance, you can tell it's a strong performance in that one.
Yeah.
Plus, again, naval battles, stuff like that. It's just so much fun.
Yeah. I mean, Gladiator is one of my favorite films of all time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I still cry while listening to the soundtrack of that. And it's been, I don't
Yeah.
even know how long since I saw the film for the first time. But yeah, Now We Are Free. If that song comes up
Yep.
on a playlist ever, I'm immediately emotional. Doesn't matter where I am. If I'm in the grocery
Yeah.
store listening to my headphones, I'm like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one that I really need to see.
Have you read the books? Okay.
No,
I've
I
only
know
read the first
literally,
one.
I know there's a ship, and I know that Russell Crowe is in it, and I know that Billy Boyd is in it, and that is all I know about that film.
I didn't know that Billy Boyd was in it. I'll have to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, it's Billy. It's not Dominic. It's Billy, right? Right, chat? Pretty sure it's Billy Boyd. Who I also love.
Yeah, right. I mean, why not?
It's Pippin.
There's no good reason not to.
Do you ever watch the podcast that he and Dom do?
I need to.
They're funny.
Most of the time I'm listening to audiobooks.
That's
but
fair.
I should. And podcasts for some reason haven't quite hooked me yet. Like I haven't quite found one that I'm just like, this is what I look for when I'm looking for podcast type thing. So
I'm the same way. I watch their podcasts every once in a while on YouTube because I like to see the people. I don't like to just So hi, Derry.
And I mean their on-screen chemistry is so good.
Oh,
Their banter, like they play off of each other, and you can hear it in their voices, but you see it so much more when you can actually watch them. I love watching interviews with them, and
oh my gosh, I love when the 4 of them get together, and you can tell that it's like Sean Astin and the kids. You know, it's great. Jerry, we've been just chatting about the different iterations of Spider-Man, DC, and the Marvel universe. Well, we haven't really talked about Marvel yet. So, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Top 3 Marvel characters.
Spider-Man and Daredevil are definitely in the top 3.
Okay.
I'm gonna actually go with X-Men character that has never been brought to screen and that I would love to portray, and that's Mimic.
Ooh.
Does anybody even know who that is? And the only reason I like him is because I like his abilities. Like I haven't read hardly anything with him in it, but he's just so his ability, his mutant ability is that he can mimic other people's abilities that he's in close proximity with. And so when he fights the X-Men, he has all of the X-Men's abilities with none of their understanding of their abilities. And so it's like, because you can gain a power and not know how to use it,
which would be a dumpster fire. Yeah.
But it's also, when you have so many of them, it's like you're just powerful as it is. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff to it, and I need to specifically go and look into more of his comics. The ones that he's in are like the old original X-Men comics.
Yep.
And I haven't read many since then, but just a very underrated character that nobody seems to know about, and I really like.
That would be awesome. I will never complain about more X-Men ever. Because like it was always funny because everybody was always talking about DC and Marvel and the Avengers and the Justice League, and I'm over here like X-Men. Like I will pick them every single time. Because I grew up watching the old X-Men films, and like Magneto is one of my favorite characters in the superhero genre ever. And so to answer your question, Fox, either or, but Marvel specifically, I think I would go Iron Man and Black Widow are top 2 for sure, and I would say Tom Holland's Spider-Man is now up there. So
and if we're talking specifically about the movies, Cap is absolutely top, probably number 1 if we're just talking about the films. But in terms of all of comics, I really like those 3 that I mentioned.
I like Cap. I mean, like, who doesn't? But also, I've always had a heart, like, when I watched the Captain America films, I'm here for Bucky, if I'm being totally honest. Like,
it's fine.
Because I think my problem that I've always had with Steve is that, like, I'm a notorious anti-hero person at this point, I feel like, and I feel very strongly that Steve he's too perfect. Like, he's not, but he is, and it always I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to everyone. I find him kind of boring. But also I appreciate what he gives us to aspire to, if that makes sense. Like, I appreciate his selflessness for the most part, and like I can appreciate him, but I need a little bit more I need a little more shade in my heroes.
No, and that's fine. Like, that's a perfectly reasonable opinion to have. Like, I have no problem if people disagree with me on that. I feel like for one, I feel like the 3 Captain America movies are probably the 3 best movies in the MCU, or at least top 5. And so I feel like that's part of it for sure. And I feel like Chris Evans' portrayal,
he did a very good job.
Has been very, very good.
Yes.
But I, like you, I really like what he aspires to be, and what we should aspire to be by looking at him and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Like, I really appreciate and respect that aspect of it. But also, I'm a patriot, and so like I can't not like him type thing.
That's fair. Yeah. I love a character with my favorite thing is an anti-hero with a redemption arc. That is like my favorite thing, which is why I like Bucky. Black Widow also, like, I want to be her when I grow up. I always have. She's amazing. I love her so much. And also the fact that I remember when I first saw some of the Marvel movies, and like, you know, getting to see an awesome kick butt redhead on screen, I was just like, thank you. Yes. Love to see it.
I mean, there's
very cool.
I liked Falcon up until the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show. Like, after that, I was like, he ruined it, partly because the storytelling in that was not good. And that seriously damages appreciation of characters.
For sure.
up until that point, he was one of my favorite characters in the MCU.
Yeah. Rogue is also excellent.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking X-Men, yeah, Black Panther's also very good. X-Men is its own category for me.
Like, it kind of is.
Yeah.
They're kind of, I mean, part of it's become the fact that they had their own franchise of films and everything, and it kind of separated them from the rest of the Marvel universe. But also their roster is so big, like it could be Marvel and DC and X-Men, and
right,
like it would work.
It would be fine. Yeah. Thanks, Charmaine. Derek,
that is,
actually,
I will say, that is how you feel about, that is how I feel about Superman, is what you said about Captain.
Yeah, same for me with Superman.
And part of it is just the he has no weaknesses, and I like, technically he has kryptonite, technically he's not immune to magic, but those don't feel like weaknesses to me.
No,
like there's nothing to him, and what I appreciate is when you get a character who can tear him down through his mind, which is why Lex Luthor becomes such a good villain when he doesn't have kryptonite. And a lot of people don't like the Jesse Eisenberg iteration in Batman v Superman. I think, well, for one, I think Jesse Eisenberg is a great actor. And I also don't think he was given his time to shine as that character.
Right.
But I really like what they were doing. Again, what Zack Snyder was doing with the writing of those films.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I was going to just respond to this. I do like Angel too. No, you're fine. I'm actually very patriotic, Derek. I just like a little bit of anti-hero in my hero. Like I need the anti with it, you know? Like I'm trying to think of a like, okay, so here's an example. You've got Wolverine and you've got Captain America. Okay, both of them start out as something less powerful than they are later on, and they're turned into super soldiers. Logan is a hot mess all the time, but he does the right thing despite himself, and I love that. I love an anti-hero that like is a grumbling about it the entire time, but he's still gonna save the kid. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate that a lot. And none of us are ever gonna be Captain America, let's be real.
Right. And like, I get that and I understand it, but it's something to strive for. And even
100%.
One of the old interviews with Chris Evans is him talking about how he's everything I desire to be, or I strive to be, or something like that. And for that alone, that symbol is so important.
Agreed.
And yeah, I'm not offended if somebody doesn't like him as much as I do, but I really like Captain America.
No, I totally get that. I think he's very similar in a way to how, you know, like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, we have this very traditional style hero character, but he's I mean, obviously for me Aragorn is definitely top tier character, but like I appreciate having that role model character that reminds you that like there are people that can be like this, and I think that's really important. I find the anti-heroes to be more relatable, but I feel like the heroes we all need. My husband is also a big fan of Ant-Man. That one was a little just too weird for me. That's a superhero thing that I'm just like, but why? Just because you can.
Right.
Yeah. The first Iron Man film is still to this day one of my absolute favorites. I love Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Iron Man so much.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, I think as much as I love the Captain America movies, I do believe that Tony's arc throughout the MCU is the best, is the strongest. From the self-centered narcissist to the hero, like that.
We love a redemption arc.
He's not a bad guy to start with,
no,
but he's not a hero in any way, shape, or form.
He's very self-centered. Yeah, very, very self-centered. Yeah, and I love to see that growth, because if we start from the bottom, we actually have like this really cool opportunity for growth there, and I'm really drawn to that in storytelling. This one made me laugh. That's fair. I mean,
I agree.
like,
I mean,
it's Henry Cavill. Like,
yes.
No judgment.
I'm not. I have not yet seen anything that makes me look forward to the new Superman film that does not have Henry Cavill in it. And see, I really like Nicholas Hoult, and he would be a really good. He's going to be a very good Lex Luthor. So like, Nicholas Holt's great.
Yeah.
I think the gal that they've got for Lois Lane is going to do really good, and I'm sure everybody else will too. I don't like the look of the film at all. Like it does not, and of course it's a trailer. It's all we've seen, but like nothing in it makes me think this looks good. And apparently I'm in a minority with that. But
yeah, I haven't even seen the trailer, so
sorry, perfectly acceptable.
I agree with this, Pete. I want to see, I want to see some spin-offs of X-Men that are actually well done.
Yeah, like Mimic.
Yeah, see? T, you just need to go into filmmaking and like
I'm trying.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you get in there, make us a Mimic film that we can all go see.
I would like to. That'd be fun.
That would be awesome. So is that something like what do you see your role being if you get into filmmaking? Do you want to be in a more directorial position, or like what do you see yourself doing in that field?
Oh, I want to act.
Nice.
That's kind of where my interests lie mostly. The unfortunate thing is that I live in Alaska, and there is no whatsoever film and television scene in Alaska other than reality TV shows that aren't real. So it's basically, I mean, there's like student films and stuff like that, but it just if I want to do it, I really have to leave Alaska, and I might, but I'm trying to make my own way there without having to leave Alaska, and it's not working great.
Which kind of surprised me, because I would imagine that Alaska would be an absolute dream shooting location for so many different things.
It is, except that Canada is cheaper and has better tax incentives.
Of course.
Yep. So they go to Vancouver and film everything in Vancouver, and
bummer.
It's a bummer, but it's all right. It's what it is. It's also it's expensive to get stuff up here anyways.
Sure. That makes sense.
You can drive to Canada fairly easily. Alaska you can drive to, but it's a long drive.
A lot longer. Yeah. Here you go. Derry's got some encouragement for you. If Kiwis can make it, you can too.
Well, they found Lord of the Rings there.
Yes. So you could just move to New Zealand, T.
Maybe that would be fun.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Because I would guess, and Derry can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guess that it's not going to be like crazy traffic in all parts of New Zealand either.
I don't know. Maybe.
There's this one bridge in Canada I see and everything. It's funny because it's kind of the equivalent of like every time a superhero movie comes out, or a post-apocalyptic or a disaster film or anything, I'm like, and it's always New York City that's going to be destroyed. Like, can we destroy like something else for once?
I mean, sorry, too dark to say.
I could hear your train of thought there for a second.
I have to remember that I'm not on my channel. I can't say whatever I want.
My channel is pretty relaxed. Okay, I haven't even looked at my questions this whole time.
Oh, no.
Maybe I should do that. Okay, one of the questions I had for you was, I'm always like, I reread my favorite books all the time. And one of the things that surprises me is that there's a lot of people on BookTube who never reread anything, which really surprises me. And I think I was curious to know, like, why you choose to, because how many times have you reread Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit?
I'd have to count.
A lot.
I've reread it every year since I've been on BookTube, which this is year 5. But so 4 times. 4 rereads since I've been on BookTube, and then I think it was for The Hobbit another 4 times before that, maybe. in Lord of the Rings 2. So
Okay.
6 to 8 times with both of them.
Yeah. So what draws you to rereading, and what is it about a book that makes it worthy of a reread for you?
I feel like it. That's a lot of times what it is. With most book, that's what it is. If the next book in a series is coming out and I don't remember what's going on, I'll reread.
Sure.
And I don't want to read summaries because I get different things out of the books than the summarizers do, and
Yep.
so the summaries don't work for me. Um, so a lot of times it's a refresher. A lot of times it's I just want to read it again. Um, with Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit, I find new things every time I read it.
Right.
Eh, it's weird that I can say that about a fantasy book that's just complete fiction, but there's so much truth. There's so many themes
Yep.
in it, and like I you can approach the reading them in different ways. I mean, there's several different audiobooks for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit now. And so you can read them from the different narrators' perspectives because they each read them differently. They perform them differently. You can read them from different editions of the book.
Yep.
Like the illustrated editions add a different level to it because you've got illustrations there. And so like there's simple ways like that. But last year for Lord of the Rings, I reread it just from the perspective of Frodo and
Oh,
skipped everything else that wasn't from Frodo's perspective. So anytime he was
wow.
asleep, I skipped it. Anytime that
Yeah.
it wasn't his chapters. So like I didn't get any of the Three Hunters storyline at all because I just completely skipped that section.
Right.
And it gives you a different look into his mindset because you don't
Yep.
know. I mean, like I've read them enough times that I know what's going on at the certain times in the story, but you can see better from his perspective, just the constant beating down of his soul and
Right.
of his will because he doesn't know that there's good things going on outside. All he sees is the ring's corruption,
Right.
and it
Right.
just tears him down and tears him down and tears him down. And you feel that a lot more when you don't read the other things. And so there's like that's a very easy way to find something new from the books is read them from a different perspective, approach them in a different way. But
Yeah.
there's also just like if I just sit down and reread from start to finish the entire thing, there's still new things that I'll catch. And so that's really the other big reason for me to reread is because I know there's more things that I will catch, that I
Yeah.
will learn, that I will see on a reread than I would if I just read it the first time. And there's plenty of books where I read them once and like that's good, I don't need to read them again.
Right. Yeah.
um but with things like Lord of the Rings, sometimes I don't feel the urge nearly as strongly with Sanderson, but there are some I've reread uh, most of his books now because I read a lot of them before I started BookTube, and so I reread them so I could do reviews of them.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but so there was two reasons there. One of them is it's been a long time since I read
Yeah.
them, and one of them was I want to review them for the channel. Um, but most books, there's something about them that tells me I need to go back and read this again. There's something here that I can learn still,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's the big reason for me.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And I think too, like, as somebody who is a very much, do you consider yourself like plot focused, character focused, all of the above? Like, where do you kind of fall in that spectrum?
Um, primarily, I say story focused, but that doesn't really mean anything because that can be characters or plot or everything or
Yeah.
world building. It totally depends. There's not one thing that if somebody says, "Oh, this one's character focused," then I'm like, okay, that's a book that I need to read. I don't think of it in that way. It's does this
Yeah.
story sound interesting? And if the
Right.
story sounds
Right.
interesting, then I'll read it. Which is kind of why uh, First Law has kind of dropped off my TBR.
Mm,
I don't feel like the story sounds that interesting anymore.
sure.
And part of that is because it's just from what I've heard of the first, at least the first one, it's just about the characters and there's no story or there's no plot to it beyond the characters. And that's if people like that, I'm all for it. But it's dropped off my TBR because
Yeah.
I may read it at some point, but I have no desire to anymore. It's just
It's
kind of gone
I
away.
mean, I think having read the original trilogy, it definitely has a plot, but it is definitely more of a vibes book than
Mhm.
a very the plot isn't a very front and center part of the story at all. It is
Mhm.
incredibly character focused, which didn't bother me as much because I care about how a story makes me feel and I care about the characters. Are the characters well written? And if an author ever sacrifices the character for a plot point, I'm immediately done. Like out.
Yeah.
I hate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he did something with the ending of the first Law trilogy that made me incredibly mad, and I've never forgiven him for it. So he's still kind
Mhm.
of on my timeout shelf.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he has some really good characterization, but yeah, if you're looking for, like, a storyline, yeah.
And I mean, because there's tons of books that are character focused, and the storyline is that of the character's growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those I love those, and
Yep.
I love books that don't I mean, they basically don't have a character, it's just a cardboard cutout stuck in the plot that's moving
Mhm.
along, and can love those too. And
Yeah.
so I'm not like there's no one thing that says this is what's gonna make me love it, except that it has a good story. If it doesn't have a good story, then I'm not gonna enjoy it.
Which
And
probably
again, that can manifest itself in
a lot of different
myriad of
ways.
different ways. So
Yeah, well, and I think that speaks to too. One of my goals for this year was to raise my yearly average rating,
Mhm.
because I tend to go between like a 3.6 to a 3.8 yearly average. And I was on your Goodreads today, and I was like, your average is 4.4,
I
which is
probably don't
pretty
rate very good.
high. No, but what that tells me is I was curious to know if like you feel like you enjoy a lot of the books that you read.
I do. I have a rating system, but I usually just go with my gut.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Goodreads, I just go with my gut and I just stick a star on it, just so it has something.
Yeah.
Um, and it tends to be higher. Basically, if I didn't, if there was something in it to enjoy, then it's a 3 star.
Yeah.
And if there's lots of things in it, then it's a 4 star. And if there's everything in it, it's a 5 star type thing. And there's some variance within that and stuff like that. But there, Goodreads is kind of very heavily based on my enjoyment.
Mhm.
Just how much did I enjoy this book? That's what it's going to get as a star rating.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas if I were to use my rating system, which is, let's see if I can remember it off the top of my head, it's basically characters, plot, and themes each are worth 1 star, or 1 full point, or whatever you want to call it. And
Mhm.
then world building is worth half a point. And then uh, what is it? Uniqueness factor is what I've
Mm.
ended up calling it. So what
Yeah.
is it about the series that makes it unique from everything
Everything
else,
else.
even within like dystopian, which there's so many dystopians that are so similar. What's the thing that makes it unique? And so
Right.
that also gets half a star, which that all of that together comes out to a 4 star book. So if they have it perfect, it's a 4 star book. And then that fifth star comes down to enjoyment.
Yeah. That makes a lot of
And
sense.
so that's how I would rate it if I were to actually analyze the book as I'm going. Um, and I used to do that on the channel, but then it just took too much time, and so I save that for analysis when I do an
Mm.
analysis of a book or a series, which doesn't happen very often. If I'm just reviewing it, I just here's my thoughts. Here's some things that came to my mind as I was thinking about this book, and that's about it. If I'm putting it on Goodreads, it's what's the enjoyment factor. So here's a interesting example that I was thinking about. There's I don't know if you know him, but J.R. Carroll on
Mhm.
YouTube.
Yep.
He has some books that he's written as well, and I think I rated the first one 5 stars that I read from him. Um, it's not perfect book. There's a lot of problems with it. He's new author. There's lots of things, but I enjoyed the book enough to give it a just 5-star on Goodreads, because why not? It was probably realistically more like a 4.5 or something if I were to go through it. And if I were to analyze it, it would probably be like a 3.5. I'm just guessing based off of what I know about it. And then I just read The Way of Adan by Philip Chase, which is objectively a good book. Like, there's a lot of really good stuff in that.
Yeah.
But my enjoyment was lower, and so I put it as a 4-star.
Yeah.
And so the worst technical book can be higher rated on Goodreads for me than the better technical book, just due to enjoyment. Right. Because that's how I rate on Goodreads. So
well, and I think that's something like, we talk about subjective and objective rating all the time on BookTube. And I think, I always remind myself of that when I'm rating, or it's very subjective for me. Like, my top 3 books last year were so different. I had Men at Arms by Terry Pratchett, was just a brilliant 5-star read. I had By Blood by Salt by J.L. Oldham, which is also a brilliant 5-star read. They're so different. They're written so incredibly differently. And then Iron Prince, which was my number 3. I've objectively read better books than Iron Prince. It meanders, but the characters, and it just checked so many subjective boxes for me that I was like, I love this book, and I wanted to reread it the minute I put it down. And that to me is worth a lot. Now, if I'm judging, like when I judge for Spiffbo, then I try to rein that subjectivity back in, and I'm like, even if this isn't a book that I would personally absolutely love in 5-star, is it a good representation of its subgenre? Is it well written? Does it have, good character work? So it really depends on the capacity, I think, for how I'm rating it. But for just on my channel, it's like, sorry guys, Lonesome Dove is a 3-star for me.
And that's like it's perfectly understandable. At least from my perspective, it's perfectly understandable to have it from to approach talking about books in that way. And so, like, with my analysis and that rating breakdown that I gave you, a 4-star is a perfect book. That 5th star comes from enjoyment. And so there's an objectivity and a subjectivity that's brought into that. And it can, I mean, most books don't hit a perfect 4-star. There's very few that would, and then there's very few that hit a perfect 4-star, but also hit a perfect 1-star for enjoyment. And so if I were to objectively, or if I were to use my rating system for every book that I read, I would have far less 5-stars and probably far less 4-stars, and my average rating on Goodreads would be significantly lower than it is.
So when you look at the synopsis of a book and you're looking at, does this sound like something that I'm interested in reading? Like, what draws you specifically to a story to say that story sounds like something I would like? Like, what are the check boxes that you look for that you enjoy in a story? That is a wide range, Jerry. Dinniman, Hobb, and Pratchett.
I would say the word just flew out of my head. An advancement of a plot of the plot or of the story for whatever that means. If that's the character going from one place to another, whether that's in their personal growth, whether that's in an actual location, a quest, or something like that. And so a journey of some sort from start to finish is hugely important to me. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a quest where you go from one place to the next. It can be a very personal journey where you're growing yourself, where you're learning yourself, and you're coming to a new point within yourself. And so that's probably the biggest thing for me, is a journey of some sort when I'm looking for it. But in terms of, I mean, I don't know that that's going to exist until I read the book.
Right.
But I can listen. A lot of it, especially now, comes from listening to other people talk about books. I find the people that I trust and say, and hear you and Liam and Andrew and just a whole host of the people that I listen to. These people talk about the books in such a way, and I say, okay, I understand that. I'm going to choose not to read that book because
Yep.
I don't think I'm going to like it.
Yep.
Or oftentimes I'm going to choose not to read that book because there's content in it that I don't care to engage with.
Right.
But beyond that, if it's got a pretty cover, I'm more likely to pick it up. Which I know we're not supposed to judge books by their covers and whatnot, but
there's really a reason we have pretty covers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And a good cover gives you a taste of what the book is going to be like.
Absolutely.
It gives you a taste of the atmosphere of the way that this world works to some degree. Maybe not the characters, but it helps you. I really feel like most of the time a book's cover is a reflection of what's inside.
Yep.
And I feel like that's how it should be.
Absolutely should be. Yep. So. Totally agree. I know that there are a lot of people that do not like Star. I honestly just use them as it's an easy way for me to go back and see how I felt about certain books. It's a good way for me to organize books throughout the year, but I completely understand people that don't like using star ratings. Andrew was here briefly. Hi, Andrew. T is the best from Andrew.
You add the EA there and I'd agree with it.
What did I have today? I had an echinacea tea that was very lovely.
Yep.
That was a good one. I like oolongs too. Oolong teas are really good.
Usually I end up going with some form of herbal. I like herbal teas. Black tea can be good, but herbal tends to be what I go with.
That's typically my choice as well. That's what we have in the house most of the time, which partially is just because my children also love to drink tea, and I don't want them drinking anything caffeinated. So they don't need that. What did I see? Okay, so here's one that I wanted to ask you about because I know that a lot of people on BookTube have a background in this series, but we don't talk about it as much. I would love to make some videos on this series because I love it so much. And almost everybody in my chat always pops up and is like, oh my gosh, yeah. Redwall.
I knew you were coming to it.
More people talking about it within our fantasy space because I think so many people, that was like, it means so much to so many people in this community, and yet I never see anybody talk about it. So, yeah.
I always, as a kid, I always assumed that I was the only person, or our family was the only people who read it. And I know that's not the case because I've met and talked to my pastor. His family read Redwall as a kid when they were growing up and stuff like that. And so I know there's other people out there. But for some reason, I feel like it's one of the most well-known and underread book series.
100% agree. Yep.
It's so good. And it's not that there's not problems with it.
Yeah.
It's just that what it's dealing with and the way that it's dealing with it is so much more profound than people give it credit for because they think, oh, it's talking animals. It can't be that deep. It gets dark and it gets
so
heavy,
dark
and there's so much to it. And there's problems with it. Like if you try and dig into the details and try and understand it and think too much about it, just like, how does this work out? How does a mouse fight a fox and win?
I don't care.
It doesn't make sense. But the storytelling is so strong and the themes are so strong that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You just believe it. You get so immersed in them. Yeah. And I've seen, Brian Lee Durfee was going through them a while back, and it was like every time one of his videos would pop up, I was like, let's watch it. And then just recently, Raph Blue Tax went through 12 of them, I think, something like that, and had a lot of discussion. He's got a different mindset than I do, different perspective, but hearing his discussion was still good. And he's just like, these are really good books is essentially what it came down to. And
I think that's one of maybe the powerful pieces of Redwall is that, and like, I appreciate so much about this community that we can bring so many different worldviews and perspectives together and have really interesting discussions on books. And I find it interesting that Redwall is such a universally loved series. Like, it doesn't matter where somebody's coming from. It's just like everybody loves it for the most part.
Yeah. I don't understand. I understand from the sense that I love it, and so I know how other people could love it, but I don't understand how it's so universally loved.
Yeah.
Because so Kate, my sister, talks. She doesn't love it because she doesn't love anthropomorphic fantasy.
Sure.
Not because of the story. It's because she just doesn't envision stories in that way, and it's hard for her to
Yeah.
connect to the characters when they're rats. But
Fair.
it
That's
is.
fair. When you
It's a
put it like
perfectly
that. Yeah.
reasonable
Yeah.
explanation. But it's not because of the story, it's because of how the story is being portrayed.
Right.
And that's perfectly reasonable. But she never says that the stories are bad
Right.
because she doesn't think that the stories are bad. She just doesn't enjoy reading them because she doesn't connect with the characters at all.
Yeah.
And that's a perfectly reasonable take to have. But that's really what I've heard from anybody who's ever talked about him and said that they don't vibe with him. It's because it's anthropomorphic fantasy, not
Right.
because the stories are bad. And so I don't understand it, but that's really cool that that can be the case.
So okay, what is your favorite species within the Redwall books? Because I feel that says a lot about a person. Like whatever species they pick in Redwall is their favorite is a good character indicator, I feel like.
I think I'm gonna have to go with otters.
That's very fair. The otters are awesome.
And like I love the squirrels and I love the badgers. I think just on a whole, like there's individuals within each of the species that I really love. But then just as a whole, I think otters tend to be also moles.
The moles are amazing.
I can't help but love the
They're all
moles.
so good.
Yeah. So
So
it's between otters and moles for me.
is Tagarung in your top Redwall
Yes.
book? Yeah, I was
Yep.
gonna say if
It
you're an
is.
otter fan, it has to be. I love so many of them. I think my top 3 for me it's badgers are my favorite. Lady Craiga Roseeyes is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. She is an incredible character. Long Patrol is my favorite book, I think, of all of them. The hares and I'd say the moles have got to be up there for me too, but the hares I also really love a lot.
Yeah. I really like the hares when they're not characterized by their food consumption. When that is not their
Yes.
sole characteristic,
Yep.
I think the hares are some of the best characters in
Yep.
the series.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Also, Derry, Wind in the Willows is incredible.
There's so for some reason I haven't read any of the other anthropomorphic series, like the big like Watership Down or anything like that.
I haven't read
And I
Watership Down
need
either.
to.
Yeah.
I really need to because like I know that I'm going to enjoy them, and I don't have time.
That's fair.
So many books.
Someday, when we both have a little bit of time, we should read. We should do a buddy read of Watership Down because I want to read that one too. But Wind in the Willows is phenomenal. I read that growing up, and I love them. Darius says the Auckland Zoo stopped doing feeding times with the otters because it was traumatizing children. I mean, like, that's really sad and also slightly funny. I have a morbid sense of humor, so that's slightly
So do
funny.
I.
I'm sorry. I've heard this about Watership. I'm
Yeah.
fully anticipating needing to be in a good headspace to read that book for sure.
I mean, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
As soon as you, well, a couple things. When you remove humans from the picture, you can do a lot more butchery and get away with it.
Yeah.
And so, but that also means that you can tell some really good stories, really deep stories. But it also gets dark if you start to think about what's actually going on. So,
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. I would also say, okay, favorite Redwall books. You said Tagarong would probably be up there for you. Long Patrol is up there for me.
My top 3 I have for a long time said are Tagarong, Rackety Tam, and Matameo.
Nice. Matameo, interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And upon reread, I would I've been rereading Rackety Tam for like over a year now. And it's not because I don't love it or don't want to read it. It's just I've got so many other things, and something else comes up. I'm like, oh, I need to read this, and so it just keeps getting put down. But I know the story so well that I can just keep going back and picking it up and being like, oh, it's been 3 months since I last read a chapter. That's all right. I remember what happened.
Yep.
But Rackety Tam, it's one of my favorite stories. Tagarung as well. Tagarung I think is the one that I have reread the most. It's between that and Martin the Warrior, because I had both of those on audio. We would get the discs from the library, and then we'd burned them onto our MP3 players, and so I had them illegal, but that's all right.
Those were the days.
I'm not selling them. I'm not sharing them with anybody. It's personal use.
We're gonna have to turn you in.
That doesn't make it better, but it's been a long time. But because of that, I had those ones, and I would listen to them on repeat. Not on repeat, but I'd listen to one, and then I'd go listen to something else, and then I'd come back and listen to the other one, and it'd be that I do that same thing over and over again. So those two I've listened to, I don't know, probably as many times as I've read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
Yeah,
it's pretty close to it, and so
Tagarung is that one's really classic. I would say I think if I had to pick a top 3, it would probably be Long Patrol, Rackety Tam, and Loamhedge. I also really love Loamhedge a lot. Yeah.
The other one that I love to put high, but for some reason those other 3 always end up beating it out, is Outcast of Redwall.
Oh, okay, sure. That's another otter one, isn't it?
No, it's about a ferret.
Oh yeah. I was about to say close enough, but I'm not gonna Neetha right now.
I mean, they are.
They're not the same. They're not the same.
No, but that's one that and this is something that Jakes did really well, was he could tell each of the books in a different format.
Yeah.
And so the Vale's the character. Outcast of Redwall, it starts out, in the first half of it's about a certain characters, and then the second half is about Vale. And so that second half in the storyline, it's actually like the third of the book based on where it actually splits, but it's kind of the two storylines. That second storyline is about Vale, and it's always been so impactful to me for some reason. And I think there's lots of discussions about like nature versus nurture and stuff like that, and that's kind of what that book deals with. And in the end, he's still a ferret, but he also makes the right choices at the end. And that's something that being able to do both of those, like you're mentioning with the anti-heroes or the morally gray characters, basically those 2 books, with Tagarung, where it's a hero or a good guy character raised by the bad guys, and then Outcast of Redwall, where it's a bad guy character raised by the good guys.
Yeah.
So I think being able to see that in those stories is something that is necessary for the series and really helps add depth to the series, because if not, then it really is like, oh, these types of animals are bad animals, these types of animals are good animals, and there's no crossover. But constantly throughout the series, you're seeing that that's not the case.
Right.
There's characters that there's lots of like sea rats that come to Redwall and they're like, we'd rather live here, this is way better, and they start to change only for their training and their habits to get the better of them. And but it's not necessarily saying that, oh, these characters are evil because just all of this species is evil. It's saying this is how they were trained. They don't have any other option, essentially. And I appreciate seeing that a lot.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I liked about Jakes' writing so much is that the storyline of all of the books is very similar. And the fact that he could write that many books with essentially the same or close to the same storyline and make every one of them, like, you'd think you would have read one and you've read them all, and like it's not that exciting. But you don't care. Like, you're so invested in the characters and the story and the themes of it that it really doesn't matter, that you kind of know where it's going every time.
Yeah. Part of that's because he approaches them in a different format. So like Outcast is about or it tells two different storylines and then does a time jump in the middle.
Right.
There's some of them that the end of the, I think it's, oh, which one is it? I can't remember. Oh, it's Triss. Triss ends with a section of letters, and it's
Oh yeah.
just communication back and forth between characters. And so Jakes does this where he takes the same story and tells it from a different, like constructs the story differently.
Yep.
But then the other thing that he does with that is he'll take the same type of obstacle and twist it into a different way.
Yep.
Thinking specifically about the adders, all the snakes that come into the series. There's Asmodeus, which is like, that is the quintessential snake dragon monster. But then you read Doomwhite, and there's I can't remember the name of the snake in that one, but it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another one where there's snakes in several of the books, but they never feel like a repeat of Asmodeus or anything like that. They're always something different and unique. And the approach to them is different enough that they are terrifying each time in a completely new way.
Yeah. So, the snakes are the worst villains in my opinion. Like well, in fairness, I have a huge phobia of snakes to begin with, so like that doesn't help. But yeah, I love those books so much. And my son, he's read all of them multiple times already, and I think there's such a good gateway. And I know a lot of people talk about like the Sanderson gateway or the Narnia gateway and all that kind of stuff, or the Lord of the Rings gateway, which is all awesome. But I think Redwall has been an unsung hero in the gateway to fantasy.
I would agree. And there's something about them that they're middle grade books, technically higher end of middle grade, but they span genres or age groups at least so well. And I mean, you can read them as an adult for the first time, not having any nostalgia tied to them, and be like, this is an amazing story that's being told. I really enjoyed this. And that my personal opinion is that's how all middle grade should be. Wingfeather Saga is another great example, although a little bit younger. But you can read them as an adult for the first time and think this was an incredible story that was told.
Well, that's like when I read Hatchet for the first time this summer, and I was like, this is a tiny little middle grade survival storybook, and I absolutely loved it. It was brilliant. And I agree. I think a lot of middle grade gets dumbed down too much. And like having a middle grade reader in my house right now, it's been really interesting. Like I have to read and vet books for him from an age appropriate level just to make sure there's nothing in there that's questionable, but also from the standpoint of, is this dumbed down too much for him? Because he wants a challenge. He wants to have, he's aware enough of the world that if you dumb it down, he's not going to like it, because he's going to know you're trying to talk down to him through the story. So yeah. He's read The Hobbit too.
The Hobbit's The Hobbit's a great one. Same thing. Interestingly enough, another series that leans more towards the older middle grade is like Percy Jackson. But those ones don't hold up as you get older.
Cue Pete.
Not nearly in the same way. What does that say about Pete?
Pete's a big fan of the Percy Jackson.
No, I like them too. I do like them, but they don't hold up in nearly the same way as Redwall, which I was reading Redwall before I read Percy Jackson. And I'm still reading Redwall, and Percy Jackson I don't care about anymore. Like I do, but it's not nearly the same way. And it's interesting that a series that can seem so impactful doesn't stick in the same way that something that is unsung.
The sound of Pete's heart cracking somewhere. I think
and I don't disagree. I do like them. I think they're good books, but they don't have the longevity in the same way that Redwall does for me.
That's why I'm very interested to read Harry Potter this year for the first time, because I did not read them growing up. I'm very curious to see what my experience with them is.
I am too.
As an adult reader for the first time. And like, it helps that I already know the story overall because I've seen the films.
Yeah.
But Yes, we know, Pete. You have this hot take. We know. I have not read any of the Percy Jackson books. I tried reading the first one, and I DNF'd it. In fairness, I was an adult when I read it the first time. But yeah, I have not read. I don't have an opinion because I haven't read either of the series.
As far as Harry Potter goes, that's one that I also didn't read as a kid. I didn't watch the movies as a kid. I came to them. Me and my sister and my mom had an opportunity to watch all of them, and I was 19. So I binged all 8 movies in 4 days.
Wow.
And then I promptly went and bought the books and read the books. And so it was, I was 19, 20 when I first read the books, and I very much appreciated a lot of what was going on. And they do age up as they continue.
Yep.
But even with that, the first 2 books, and actually I've noticed it more on reread than I did on my first read. The first 3 books, they're not that young. They're suitable for a younger audience, but there's a lot that you can see in them, a lot of storytelling, a lot of character stuff that goes on with them that you just don't understand as a kid. You get the fun whimsy, and you don't understand the themes that are being played with as well.
Yeah. Well, and I was surprised because I did read the first book last year and didn't continue because I knew that I wanted to do a vlog where I read all of them together. But I was surprised at how dark the first book was. And I know that because I've seen the first movie, and I was, but there's some Professor Quirrell, and that whole situation is really dark and disturbing. And so I haven't given them to my son yet, just because I feel like he's very close to that, but it was dark enough that I was like, we're close, but we're not quite there yet.
I actually really like that I didn't come to them until I was an adult. Because I can look at them objectively without the lens of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And because of that, I could see the brilliance of the storytelling without being like, oh, this is my childhood type thing. And there's nothing wrong with any of that.
No.
But it's not the same as being able to come to them with a completely fresh eyes that, I mean, I'm not the most well-read in fantasy, but I've read enough different things to be like, okay, where does this fit in? How does this fit in? How has it influenced things since it came out, and all that kind of stuff. But I can look at the story itself, the individual story itself, and appreciate it for what it is. And that's something that I value a lot, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about that too, because there's certain aspects of the books that I'm wanting to kind of hone in on specifically, and certain characters that I think got cheated a bit in the films that I'm very much looking forward to. So I'm very curious to see how I feel about it once I get to the end. But yeah, we'll see. I am going to need a lot of moral support from my audience getting through Order of the Phoenix, because I don't handle gaslighting in books very well. And Umbridge.
Yeah.
Umbridge.
Order of the Phoenix is my favorite of the 5.
I noticed
movie
that it was,
and book. So
wow. Okay. Why?
It's the first one that really feels like you have stakes. Book 4, you're starting to, but there's so much. You've watched the movie, so I'm not afraid of spoiling it. There's so much with the aftermath of Cedric's death that plays into book 5, and it's not just angsty teenager Harry like everybody says it is. There's legitimate character things happening with him due to what he's seen, and it's very if that 5 and 6 are both tied in a lot of ways. Like they both deal very directly with a lot of things that I feel are important to the series, and to the story that's being told, and to the characters, and to their character growth. And I feel like book 5 handles it exceptionally well, while also mixing in the teenage Harry, because that is a
Yeah.
part of his life, and
Yeah.
that
Yep.
influences so much what's going on in his mindset and the way that he's thinking about things. And so I don't have any problem with that at all.
Yep.
Yeah, basically that.
I love Ron, so he's my favorite of the trio. So I'm looking forward to book Ron.
Just because he's a redhead.
It's not actually, but that is a perk for sure. Gotta love a whole family of redheads. No, I think it's because, and this honestly goes back to the first, the first book / film, which is that Ron at a very young age was willing to sacrifice I'm a huge self-sacrifice theme person in books, and Ron's self-sacrifice in book 1 and movie 1 was so like, I love him forever for that, because he's a very young kid and he
Yeah.
like he already understood the importance, quote unquote, of what Harry was of Harry. Not that I have strong opinions about Harry, but
Well,
yeah.
and he doesn't judge him for, I mean, like, he's wowed that he's meeting the great Harry Potter, but that doesn't affect his opinion of him. And you see that
No.
throughout the series in their relationship. And
Yeah.
that's, I think that honest friends is something that people
Absolutely.
need more of. So,
Absolutely. Ron's willing to call him out when he's
yeah.
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 And vice versa, because Ron also has flaws and is a jerk sometimes.
Yes.
But yeah. I'm very curious to see how Hermione is different in the books, if at all, because, and I'm not arguing that she isn't different, but I did like Emma Watson's portrayal of her, because Emma Watson, I think, is a great actress, so I thought she did a really good job. Honestly, it was such a well cast film
It
series,
is.
like it
Yeah.
really was.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the number of like great names, like Tom Felton talked about that in his memoir, about how like at the time as kids they had no concept of like who they were working with, you
Right.
know, which I think was kind of good in some ways. And
Mm-hmm.
but when you look at the cast list of the older characters, it's like that was like a
Those
studded
are
cast
those
line.
are like, yeah,
Yeah.
A tier actors, all of them. It's
Yeah.
just, I mean, Maggie Smith, the both Dumbledores, Alan Rickman, Kenneth Branagh, just
Yep.
every single book chock full of actors who are some of the most talented actors ever, including some that are the few that are still working today, which is
Right.
sad to say. But
it's been sad how many of them have been lost in the last few years here.
Yep.
Julie Walters also as Mrs. Weasley.
Yep.
Yeah, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
I agree, Pete. I'm not a fan of Harry. I'm really not. I find him quite boring. I'm sorry. I'm a Neville Longbottom stan. So in my opinion, the Chosen One, we should have gotten a book about the real Chosen One. But that's my hot take before having read the books.
I don't even think after reading the books that's that hot of a take. I think that it's perfectly reasonable, and I think that your opinion of Harry probably won't change, but you might get more context for it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. I agree, Jamie. I loved reading it in the book. That was the only part of the entire first book that got me emotional, was that scene. So I'm looking forward to Robbie Coltrane. Yep.
Yeah, Gary Oldman.
Miriam Margolyes. Yep. There was it was a lot. What's the name of the guy who plays Lupin?
It's right there. Like
he was in Black Beauty. That's the only reason I know him.
Well, he's also in Wonder Woman, and
yes,
which is Thulis. I can't think of his first name. Something Thulis.
Lupin. David Thulis? David Thulis.
Maybe.
Yes. Let me see. I think it's David. Yes, it is. Cool. Between the two of us, we got there.
But no, he's another really good actor. I mean, all of them.
Yeah.
It's very, very impressive.
I'm a massive Maggie Smith fan and also a massive Alan Rickman fan. So, yeah, like Alan Rickman, from what I've heard, Alan Rickman really made Snape's character, even out of the away from the books. Yeah.
And I think from what I understand, his performance influenced Rowling's writing of him towards the end of the series, which is really cool.
It's very cool
that an actor's performance can be that powerful.
Well, and I think it makes sense too, because just having read the first book last year, it was very obvious to me in the first book that she didn't know she didn't have an awareness writing that first book of who Snape was going, like the depth of who Snape was going to be. There was no way she knew that at that point based on how he was written. And I think I would be willing to guess that she's leans more a little bit to the side of discovery writer based on everything I know about the series. But yeah, Snape is hands down my favorite character in the Harry Potter universe without any competition. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how the books portray him.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm definitely interested to hear your thoughts as you go through them, because I think knowing you as a writer and as a person, I think that it's going to be very interesting. Just your reaction to them as you go. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah. I don't know, Pete. I'm just yes, I think that J.K. Rowling is a discovery writer. Yes.
There are some things that she has said are from the very beginning. She knew these moments had to exist.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I think that's
how you got there is
exactly. And that's one of the things that I think is important about, because as also a discovery writer slash, I wouldn't say I'm full on pantser, but closer to the discovery writer. So like with Bruhai, I have the major points. I know the major elements of each character's storyline, but like you said, it's the how are we going to get there? I don't really know. That's probably also true. So yeah, my plan is to go in just reading them for the first time, but I'm also going to be paying special attention to a lot of the Slytherin characters, because as a Slytherin, like I'm very curious to see if I can like pull some things out of those story arcs. I'm going to be very, very attentive to Draco's story arc, because I feel like he is one of the characters that got shortchanged in the films, not because of Tom Felton's performance of him, but because of the writing. I think Tom Felton was great. But Draco's a character that I like. I think there's a lot of depth and things that can be pulled out of his character that I enjoy reading. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Well, both Draco and Lucius, and from what I remember, Lucius especially, there's never a lot clearly stated about him, but there's a lot that's implied, and if you look for it, you will see it, and there's a lot more depth to the character. And I think Jason Isaacs does a phenomenal job.
Oh, he's phenomenal. Yeah,
with that character, and with implying in his performance these things that are there. So.
That's the thing. I will die on the hill that the most loyal character in all of the Harry Potter universe was Snape. That's my hill. Which is my comeback when everybody's like, "Why you're not Slytherin? Why would you want to be Slytherin?" I'm like, I'm sorry. Snape exists. Yeah. I don't Draco with a mustache just does not feel right.
No.
They're too slick for that. No. The Malfoys are way too slick for facial hair. Yeah. That's not a thing
it'd have to be something special, and I'm not sure how, but it'd have to be something unique to them.
Honestly, like that was probably Lucius, like his biggest complaint about being sent to Azkaban is that he couldn't have a clean shaven face, to be honest. Like no mirrors.
Well, Well, I mean, you do, because there's in the movies, at least, once he, I think is it book 7 or movie 7, I guess, when they're all sitting around the table, and Voldemort steals his wand.
Is that I think that's half
I
book
don't. It
6,
might
I
be
think.
6.
I
It
think it's
might be. I
6.
don't remember. But whatever one it is, he's got stubble because and it's a character decision,
Yep.
a storytelling decision for a visual cue into what's going on in their with their characters.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Twirled his hair for sure. No. Respectfully, no. You have your own champions.
It's
Yeah, I do too.
I agree with the location or with the houses that each of the characters were put in, even though they may have qualities from other
100%.
houses.
I mean, everybody does. Like, nobody is
Yeah.
one single
Right.
note. Like,
And that's, I mean,
yeah.
that's the whole thing with Harry is he would have done amazing in Slytherin, but he chose instead to be loyal rather than ambitious. Yeah.
I would take umbrage with the loyal, but yeah, I get it. Slytherins are notoriously loyal. Yeah.
Well, what's
sometimes
I guess it's brave. It's brave is bravery is the,
like, you're gonna see a Gryffindor coming from you for from miles away. The Slytherin's the one that like is gonna just you're never gonna know it was them. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I agree, Pete. Yeah. And it's true though, because like I think it's very true that all of the characters, like, you could have placed them in another house, and they would have had aspects of that as well. So
yeah,
that's true. I'm excited to read some of the more minor characters in the books too.
Well, also Cedric, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
He would have been another one that would have done really well in Gryffindor.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he wasn't, and there's a lot of crossover between the houses, and that's she makes a point of bringing that out as you're in the story. So yeah.
I mean, the fact that Hermione is in Gryffindor is a case point in of itself, because in my opinion, she's way more Ravenclaw.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, she's totally more Ravenclaw.
And I think the movies bring this out better than, well, the first movie brings out better than the first book. But in the first movie, she says something about her choosing bravery rather than and valuing bravery more than smarts, than wisdom, than and yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Ron, you could have put Ron in Hufflepuff easily. Yep. Yeah. So, or Neville would have also been completely at home in Hufflepuff.
But again, it's about what he values and what he desires, the traits that he desires within himself. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we've been talking for almost 2 hours, which
That's good.
Is always, like, I always get to this point and I feel like we could probably talk for like 5 and not even blink, which is always a good problem to have.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's also nice to be in a conversation where you're comfortable enough to be able to talk. And I think that's a good thing about your channel for sure.
Thank you.
I don't know that I could do that with everybody, quite honestly.
I appreciate that. That's something that honestly is one of my biggest goals with having people on the channel, is that I legitimately just enjoy having open and genuine conversations with people about books, because it helps that on BookTube we start with a common ground. Like, that makes it so much easier, because we have a lot of overlapping taste in books, and so that's not ever hard to find things to talk about, I feel like. But I appreciate that. That's an important part of what I do. So thank you. To the chat, once again, go down in the description box below. There's a link to T's channel. Give him a subscribe. He's about to hit 1,000 subscribers, which is very exciting. It's a big milestone. And yeah, T, thank you so much for hanging out this evening. This has been a very long overdue Motley Troop chat.
I was pretty bummed when I couldn't do it when we were talking about it before, but thank you for for inviting me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time. And chat, you guys are awesome as always. Thank you for hanging out with us. If you're watching the replay, thanks for hanging out with us. I hope that you are reading some 5-star reads, having a great week, and we'll see you in the next video.